Hey everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. I'm here today to ask you a question, and that is, why do you want to play guitar? Seems like a simple question at first, but when you really dive into it, it actually goes pretty deep. I started asking my students that question whenever they started lessons, because I heard a self-help guy once say, if you have a strong enough why you want to do something, you're more likely to find the how to accomplish that very thing. And so I thought, if I just ask all my students why they want to play this piece of wood with metal strings on it, maybe we can get down to the bottom of their motivation and then figure out where to go from there. It was kind of a way to roadmap their journey. And I realized that most of the answers I got from that question can be broken down into 9 levels because I saw the result of them. I also realized what it was like to teach people at the different levels. So let's get right to it. We have 9 to cover, like I said. It's a lot of fun to dive into this kind of stuff, so let's go. Level 1 is when a student would come in and I would ask them that question and they would simply say, I don't know. I don't know why I want to play guitar. That was always a bad sign because right away you're starting off with very weak footing. There's no real motivation behind what they're doing. 9 times out of 10, it's because their parents are forcing them to do something. I could always tell the level 1 students because they usually sat like this with their guitar, just kind of leaning back, and the guitar was always just sitting on their lap, almost like they didn't want to even pick it up. And it was very depressing as a teacher to see someone sitting there with that posture. It told me right away that it wasn't going to be a pleasant situation, probably for either of us. One thing that really bumped me out about that is that I found myself having to be more of a strict teacher and teach strictly by the book, I should say. I wasn't mean or anything like that. I just had to follow the game plan pretty much straightforward. I couldn't use any creativity while teaching. I really like to adapt lessons to each student, but if they don't even know why they're there, I have really no choice but to open up the Mel Bay method book and just start from page 1. I put these students at level 1 because it was really rare, I would say extremely rare, that one of them out of the hundreds or however many I had over all those years would actually have a breakthrough and decide that they really do love the guitar. Because they started off with no ambition, no real motivation to do it, they really never caught on to it no matter what I did. And the second level answer I would sometimes get is that they were simply bored, so they decided to take guitar lessons. There was a time, actually, believe it or not, when we didn't have smartphones, and so people would get bored. Nowadays, they just scroll away, but back then we didn't have as many options. So the I'm bored crowd usually came from like young kids whose parents gave them a short list of options of what they could do during the summer, let's say. So instead of doing all different types of activities, they decided on the guitar. But the good news is the students usually weren't forced into guitar specifically. They were given a choice and they chose the guitar over other things. Because they chose the guitar, I really want to represent it well. I did this with all my students, but some people just weren't receptive to it. So at least at level 2, I could show them a few things, ask them what kind of music they liked. They chose guitar for a reason. So usually they like some kind of music. And then I had something to work with. With level 1 students, it was like squeezing blood from a stone, like they say. But with level 2 students, I would usually get 1 or 2 bands or artists that they liked. So, I had something to work with. I was a little bit happier about that, and I could be a little more flexible with lessons and make it a little more fun and customized. It's funny how little it takes to make a guitar teacher happy or to feel good. And it just took a little bit of interest like that. So you could tell these level 2 students were actually searching for something. They were trying to get away from boredom, and they selected a path. So that's a great first step, in my opinion. The answer I would get from level 3 students was something like they were inspired by a movie or a video game to start to play the guitar. I like to talk about the huge influx of students I used to get whenever there was some kind of huge fad going on in society. So when School of Rock got big, suddenly a bunch of students came in. They started calling, knocking on the door, and they wanted to learn songs because they saw the movie, and they were inspired, as was I, by, Jack Black, and that entire movie is just incredible. I experienced another huge wave after Guitar Hero got big, and I remember it was mostly after Guitar Hero 2 came out, because people were really getting into the songs, and they loved playing those plastic guitars, so they would come in and start lessons. The problem was, though, is as soon as they started to try to play the real thing, they found out that it wasn't as easy as pressing a bunch of plastic buttons. Little did they know that if they stuck with it for a little bit longer, it would have exceeded how much fun you can have at Guitar Hero. I might be biased being a lifelong guitar player, but still, I totally believe that. The students that were inspired more by movies, like I said, School of Rock, they tended to last a little bit longer because they saw that it was a process. They saw the entire thing where they had to practice, they had to get good, they had the whole montage and everything. So they had, I think, lower expectations of trying to get really good fast, and they gave it a little bit more effort. But in the end, still a lot of people do quit after a while when they don't feel like they're really catching on. And that did happen with them as well. But while they were inspired, it was incredible to see how hard they worked towards getting good at their instrument. So I would put them at level 3 for sure. Way better than the students who didn't care, and way better than the students who were just bored. Level 4, I put in quotes because it's kind of a joke, but it would be to get the chicks. Like that's an old-fashioned thing to say now. But there were times where I had girl students come in that were trying to get guys to notice them because they played an instrument. So it goes both ways. But back in the day, they would say, oh, you're just trying to get the chicks. The funniest thing is that a lot of them didn't admit that to me till a long time into lessons. They'd get decent and they would say, you know what? I really just started this to get this girl to notice me or to get this guy to notice me. And I thought that was really funny because I think that's always a motive deep down inside. People want the attention from people they like. But, they finally admitted it, and sometimes it was very blatant. Now, very few things burn as hot as the inspiration from that source. So when you really like somebody and you think they're going to like you if you get good at this thing, man, you should see the work that they put into their instrument. It was very cool to see while it lasted. The sad part is that could go a few ways. There's like a darkness at the end of the tunnel, if you want to put it that way. The sad part is, though, is sometimes when they reach their goal, it was like they put a ceiling on themselves. So they're like, okay, I reached it. What else do I need this thing for? And they would move on. And it was really sad for me to see that because I kind of felt like they used guitar, something I really hold sacred, as a way to just achieve something, and once they got it, they were done with it. That was kind of a bummer for me to see. Other students would not reach their goal, and maybe the person that they were interested in went off with somebody else. And so they got depressed by that, and they thought, well, this didn't work. It was a good experiment, and then they would quit because of that. And another thing that would happen is sometimes the people that didn't reach their goal would stick with guitar because at least they had this in their life, even if they didn't have their dream date or whatever. And I think in the back of their mind, they thought, well, if I keep going, if I keep getting better and better and better, somebody's going to come along and notice. The level 5 answers I would get are people whose parents, one of them, usually it's not both of them, usually it's one or the other, wanted to play guitar their whole life but never did, or play guitar and just don't have time to teach or are nervous about trying to teach their son or daughter. So they would send them to me to learn. And this would happen probably way more than you'd expect. I had so many students come in and their dad walks in, let's say, and the dad looks so excited, almost like he's going to take the first lesson. And then he goes out to the waiting room and there's, kid is sitting here all excited as well. I think it's because they feel the enthusiasm from their dad in this case, and they want to do them proud. They want to get really good at the very thing that their dad is so excited about. And I always found this really sweet because you could tell they have really good intentions in their enthusiasm. Wanting your parents to be proud of you is a huge thing, at a certain age. I would say at any age, but especially when you're younger and it's almost like you want to prove yourself to them. Now, these students had a lot going for them. Level 5 is getting pretty high now. So the reason why is because they grew up surrounded by music, most likely. If one of their parents wanted to play music, or they're just into guitar, they're just into music, the kid's probably going to grow up hearing a lot of different influences. And a lot of these kids are surrounded by instruments as well. Obviously, if their dad wanted to play guitar, he's probably going to have one sitting around somewhere. So, you're going to pick it up as a kid and play with it. So you're already a little bit excited and you've already had a little bit of hands-on experience. That's a huge step in the right direction, a really good head start. I already talked about the motivation of wanting to make your parent proud. But the look on their face when they learn something in the classroom and then they go out and show their parents and they're both excited. Like, check this out, Dad, I could play Crazy Train or something. And it's just like this thing that keeps feeding their motivation and ambition, is the fact that they can go share it right away with their parents and they were both excited. These students always did really, really well for a long time. But it wasn't always a win-win situation because inevitably the student would get older and they would find interests that they were really into. They found it less important to try to impress their dad or their mom all the time. And they just found like they weren't as excited about it as maybe they thought they were personally. They were just doing it because of their parents. And as you know, as kids get older, they want to start to rebel against their parents even. So the thought of learning all of Dad's favorite songs, just wasn't very appealing. Wanting to learn a bunch of Rush songs, for example, isn't going to be as exciting when you hit that rebellious age and all of a sudden, I don't want to play that old man music, So as the enthusiasm's burning, It's some of the best moments ever as a teacher. You know, everything feels like it's clicking, everything is just working. But as soon as it dies, it can die hard and it can die really fast. So enjoy it while it's there. Whenever I asked a student why they wanted to play guitar and they would say, it's because my friends play and they want to start a band, I instantly knew that it was going to be a good thing for a long time. So I put this at level 6. Going beyond wanting to impress your parents, let's say you're in the rebellious stage now. Suddenly you're around friends that are into the same thing you are, and maybe they want to start a band, and that's ultimate motivation. That's what really pushed me into wanting to practice a lot, because you don't want to let your friends down, even more than you don't want to let yourself down, because you're forming this group, you have all these exciting plans, and so the only thing standing between you and those plans becoming real is practice time. So a lot of students would come in, they would sit down, and they would have a list of things they wanted to learn, and it was great if they wanted to learn a band that was relatively easy, I would say. Maybe we're starting like a Green Day type project. I could show them some power chords and all of a sudden they were playing songs that they were excited about. And of course, I would still teach them the fundamentals. That's kind of the art of teaching. You really have to know how to walk both worlds. Give them something to be inspired with, but also give them the things that they're going to need for the rest of their lives. And they also got almost instant feedback. Not as quick as the parents in level 5 where you'd go out to the waiting area and show the parents, but they would go home, they would eventually have band practice, and they could use whatever we learned in guitar lessons in practice and instantly see if it's working or not. And since I've been in so many bands in my life, I'm able to train somebody to play in a band really well. So it was cool to see them get positive feedback from their bandmates. Then they would come back to lessons the next week and have another list of things to work on. It was great. I have a student now that I've actually been teaching since 1999, I believe. And we're going to do a podcast pretty soon. But that's how he started off. His friend brought him in and they were like this guitar duo for a while. So I would teach them both. They would go home and jam together. And it was just this great relationship building thing for them as well as the student and myself. So it's funny because we're friends now. He was actually in a band with me. So this could be lifelong stuff, you know, if it's brought in the right way and if it's cultivated. The level 7 students were always the students who loved music, just in general. So they'd walk in and they'd be humming a song, they'd have a band t-shirt on or something, and I always felt a bit of relief whenever that happened. Because unlike the first couple levels, I didn't have to force bands on these people. Hey, check this out, I hope you like this, and show them all the stuff I liked. Instead, they would come in and they already had a love for music, so that easily translated over to the guitar. So I have to admit it, artists like Taylor Swift really brought in a lot of people. A lot of Swifties came in and they wanted to learn how to play, you know, the basic 4 chords on a capo, be able to play all Taylor Swift songs. So it was really great to see them light up as soon as they were playing one of her tunes, and it wasn't that difficult to get them playing it either. And it wasn't just Taylor Swift either. We had people wanting to come in back in the old days, wanting to learn every Green Day song or Nirvana songs, and those are relatively, I don't want to say easy, you know, don't get me wrong. If you know my videos, you know I never call things easy. But they were less challenging than, say, if somebody came in and wanted to learn a bunch of Rush. So that's why the flame of inspiration was so bright in these people, because they already loved music, and all of a sudden they were playing that very music on this instrument, and it didn't take very long for that to happen. One problem, though, is if you're a huge music fan and all of a sudden you learn how to play all your favorite songs on the guitar, what can happen is sometimes you lose the mystery of the music because you feel like you know how it works. It's kind of like they say, you know how the sausage is made, it's just not the same anymore when you eat it. But, you know, that isn't always the case. And what happens is it sometimes gives people just a new appreciation for what goes into making a song. Now, the reason I put these students at level 7, the ones who love music so much, over the level 6 students, is because the level 7 students have a personal connection to music. And when they play it, you could really feel like they're lighting up inside. Versus the level 6 students who are in bands and they play in a lot of group projects. And it feels like they need that sort of connection to really feel it. You know, you could have both, obviously, but I put the level 7 students as the ones that could go home, just play by themselves and feel just as good as the other students who would have to play in a group. And as an introvert, I think I'm biased, but I think that's a very powerful thing to have, because you're never afraid, for example, of getting kicked out of a band, because you're like, okay, I'll just take my stuff and I'll jam in my bedroom and I'll be just fine. The level 7 students stick with guitar a long time, if not for the rest of their lives, just because now it's synonymous with music itself, playing guitar. So it's not like you could separate them all of a sudden. Even if they're only able to play a few chords and jam along, it seems like they want to do that because they feel more connected to the very thing that they love, which is music. So it's really great to see them fuse the two together. One of my favorite responses to the question of why do you want to play guitar is when somebody says, I have all these ideas and I want to find a way to get them out. These are my level 8 students. Now, this was really rare back in the day, and I hate to say it, but it's even more rare today. It just seems like creativity, I don't know if it's dying, but it's just getting pushed off to the side. A lot of people are taking in other people's creative works, but to ask a student now to create something, it almost seems to like confuse them. It's really weird. But back in the day, when a student would come in and they would just be super energized, they'd be like, finally, I have a way to get these ideas out. As a teacher, I felt great because I felt like I was going to be able to give them that path, give them that outlet to get those creative ideas out into the world and materialize them. Now, these students learned in a different way. This is where teaching for a long time teaches you a lot personally, because you learn how people learn. It sounds weird. You know, with all these different levels, you almost have to teach in different ways. So with creative people, you would give them one thing, like you would teach them a G chord, for example. And instead of just going, okay, there's a G chord, I'm done practicing, they would go home and they would take, whatever you taught them. Typically I would give them 2 or 3 chords. So they would come back and all of a sudden they'd have a progression going and a bunch of ideas flowing out. And that was always fascinating to me, to give a student so little and have them come back with so much. It was like the opposite of getting blood from a stone. And another example is if you gave them a scale to practice, they wouldn't just mechanically practice it like a robot. Instead, they would play with it a little bit and they'd find a way to add that to whatever they were creating. So I had a student that was always like, that would sound really cool over a G chord or something. Let's try it. And then we would just bounce things off of each other. One of my best students was actually my first boss. It was a CD retail store, and I was selling CDs in a mall. And I found out that he wanted to start to write songs. And so I started to teach him guitar, and I remember our first lesson, I taught him 3 chords. It was G, C add 9, and D. And by the next time I saw him, he had 5 songs written already. He had a whole bunch of lyrics ready to go. He just had no way to get them out. So the guitar was the perfect vehicle for that. So to a lot of guitar students, teaching them 3 chords is just that. Okay, I have these 3 shapes, I'm good. But to a creative person, 3 chords can unlock so many doors. And that's a great lesson, a great thing to keep in mind for all of us, is that it's not always about learning more on the guitar. Oh, I need to know 500 scales. It's more about what can you do with the one scale that you know currently. I have to laugh because my boss, who by the way became one of my best friends, and we're actually in a band together now. It's so weird how life works. But he did so much with those first 3 chords that I gave him that I almost laughed like a little kid because I was so excited. I'm like, just wait till I teach you a minor chord. Okay, we've reached the highest level. And I think you're going to find out something interesting about this because it's actually not my favorite level of student. Even though it's the highest, level 9, here's the reason why. It was the students that were just completely obsessed with the guitar, a lot like I was when I first started guitar lessons. Now, whatever got them to the dance, whether it was a previous level that we already spoke about, or if maybe they just held a guitar one time and fell in love with it right off the bat, something changed in their DNA and all of a sudden this became part of their body. I'm kind of speaking from experience here because a lot of this, like I said, is what I personally experienced myself. But we'll leave that to when I talk to my first guitar teacher ever. It's going to be a video coming up pretty soon. Look forward to that. Should be interesting. Whenever I got a student like this, it was really rare. But, I knew it was going to be a challenge. And I could actually feel my heart rate kind of speed up before they walked through the door. Because I felt like I was going into like battle or something. Not battling them, but just knowing that we're going to be fighting and working as hard as possible to learn as much as possible in that lesson. But the problem was a lot of these students couldn't get enough, and they would ask me a million questions, and usually I had all the answers, not always, but they would come in with like that huge dictionary of a book called Guitar Grimoire. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but they would have a million questions about that book, and it was such a crazy, confusing book to me, but I did my best, and we were able to get through a lot of it, but man, was that insane. Then we get through that, and the next week they'd be like, I want to learn the beginning of Eugene's Trick Bag, that Steve Vai solo from Crossroads. If you haven't heard heard it yet, check it out. It's amazing. And that would freak me out because you always felt like, you just couldn't give them enough material. They were just gobbling it all up. But at the same time, you were very proud of them because they were doing so well. One reason why level 9 students weren't always my favorite is because a lot of them were really, really serious. And who can blame them? They're learning some intense stuff on the guitar. It's like when you're working out, you're not always smiling, My level 8 and below students, they could just relax a little bit and smile and enjoy playing guitar. But it felt like my level 9 students were possessed, and all they wanted to do was learn the next thing or get really, really good at the current thing that they were working on. So knowing that I had a little bit of that in myself, I could relate to them. And so I like to talk to them and give them some advice about, have fun while you're doing this. I know you're on this rocket ride journey to the top, but if all you do is focus on the final goal, it's like you're going to forget about all the steps it took to get up there, and you might take it for granted. This happened a lot in jiu-jitsu. So all of a sudden somebody would start and they would show up at every class and they just worked their butts off. It was insane to watch some of these people. And it paid off for a lot of them. They got their black belts, they opened their own school, and it's kind of funny talking to some of them because they'll say the same thing. They'll be like, I was so focused on becoming a black belt that I didn't realize that for the rest of my life I'm going to be a black belt. So, I didn't really enjoy every single step of the way. I should have just really enjoyed being a purple belt for a long time, But that's kind of what you need sometimes to get to very high levels. You just have to, blast to the top. And once you're up there, you have to figure things out then. As far as my guitar students that were like that, a lot of them went on to do really great things. Some were in touring bands. Others just got super good and stayed in their basement, But it's okay with them because they were so obsessed with the guitar, they're okay just doing that. And I'm happy to say that a lot of them have chilled out a little bit and learned how to enjoy the guitar for other aspects other than just becoming the very, very best. You can only run at those RPMs for so long before you start to burn out a little bit, or just things start going wrong. You start to realize that there's more to guitar than just being the best or the fastest or whatever goal you had initially. So I'm curious what your level would be if somebody just came out and asked you, why do you play guitar? Would your answer resemble any of these 9 that I talked about today? Okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you at the next video. Bye-bye.